The Australian Rugby Business Network will be hosting its second event of the year on Monday, the 7th of August in Sydney, where the focus will be on raising the awareness of mental health and the repercussions for people at all levels of rugby. Managing Director of The Final Whistle, Greg Mumm, is the guest event host, and the RBN has the pleasure of speaking with him in the lead up to this event. Greg, thanks for giving up some of your time to chat with us.
You're welcome.
Well, Greg, before we speak about the upcoming event in Sydney, it's worth mentioning that you were once an aspiring rugby player who was forced into an early and unexpected retirement due to injury. I'm sure it must have been an extremely difficult time for you to process that all your dreams and goals as being a professional player were gone. How did you deal with that mentally, especially at a relatively young age?
Yeah, it was difficult. We were from a very strong rugby family. My granddad was from New Zealand, so was my dad. Granddad actually got one test for the All Blacks, so we kind of grew up with rugby in the blood. And my last game was competitive game was for my first 15 at school. And from there, we'd had big aspirations about where I wanted to go, but my knee gave out in the gym a few weeks later and never actually got back to competitive rugby again. So the biggest thing for me really was watching my mates go on and play, and that sense of a lot of my self-worth growing up had come around my sport and my rugby. And even though I had, done well at school, when rugby was taken out of my life, I hadn't given a lot of thought to what else was next. All of a sudden, without rugby there, I really struggled to find direction and find a sense of who I was. And without a sense of who I was, I didn't really have anyone to talk to, I guess. Back in those days as well, we're talking 20 years ago now, it wasn't really something that you spoke about. You kind of sucked it up and got on with life. But, looking back now, there definitely would have been periods where, I would have classified myself as having some mental health issues, but you didn't talk to your peers about it back then, and a lot of other people in the community didn't really have the awareness or the skills to notice it in people either. So.
Well, all these years later, is there any part of you that still struggles to accept that this was the hand you were dealt? And does seeing your brother Dean play rugby, currently with over 50 caps for the Wallabies, make it that much more difficult?
No, I think that was actually something I enjoyed, and probably something that was a little bit easier for me to swallow. I guess I was lucky to coach Dean at 5 different times during his career. He's probably sick of me by the end of his career. But, seeing him being able to, I guess, live the dream that I'd wanted to, and also, I guess, having success in coaching and being able to go and coach at 2 World Cups as well, I felt very happy that I was able to achieve those things through my own coaching and also see Dean achieve those. The thing for me was really, looking back, it was almost a regret that I lost those years where I lost my sense of purpose and lost my sense of achievement. And that's what we really try and do now is let people know that it's difficult, but don't beat yourself up for a number of years thinking that you're not good enough, whereas the reality is everyone goes through it. It's part of every athlete's sporting career, not just rugby players. And there's plenty of other things out there that you can be fantastic at if you are helped to kind of identify those and go and create them. And the rugby community is so good at supporting people when we have something to support them around. And a lot of people in sport, will say, sport opens doors, and it definitely does, but unless you can tell people what door you want opened and invite them into the conversation, sometimes it can be hard for them to help you. And I think whether it's your career or whether it's a tough time you might be going through, being, I guess, able to articulate that and let the community help you is a big part of that for both mental health transition as well as career transition.
Most definitely. Well, Greg, you touched on it there, your coaching career, and it spanned over 10 years, being involved from school level all the way up to international level with Fiji at both the 2007 and 2011 Rugby World Cups. Was this the next best thing to playing the sport for you?
Yeah, it definitely was the next best thing for me. I probably fell into the similar way to a lot of people, in the sense that I went off and I was in and out of university because I couldn't work out what I was doing. I started commerce and dropped that, and started law and dropped law, and ended up coaching to stay involved in the game, and then that just kind of grew into a career. And it gave me a lot of what rugby did, but you know, when push came to shove, I think even in the last couple of years of my career, ironically, when I was over in South Africa with the Waratahs, you know, I probably really enjoyed it as a tourist and a player, and probably realised then that my coaching career was as much about feeling that I could have achieved what I wanted to as a player, potentially, as what I wanted to achieve as a coach. And once you've achieved all of those things, then I was ready for the next goal, and to try to challenge myself to go and move on to something else. What I'd probably done, ironically, wrong in the same sense was I'd definitely done some qualifications. I'd done 3 degrees while I was coaching, including a master's in education, and I thought I'd go into teaching because teaching's like coaching, but I'd never actually gone and spent much time in the classroom or experienced that job. And after 6 months teaching, I realised that it wasn't the right place for me, and I felt really lost again. And we see that a lot with athletes and a lot of the players' associations, in not just rugby but other sports. They try to manage the transition issue by paying for people's education or helping them with education, which is a fantastic start. But what we're finding from the athletes we deal with is it's around creating confidence and an understanding and a vocabulary in the different environments outside of sport that is really valuable for them, because they may have a degree to go and practice as a lawyer, but if they've never spent a day in a law office and they don't really know what the 9 to 5 commitments are, or the pressure, or the work environment, it's only really half the conversation. And I think I found that out with my coaching transition, and it's partly what led me to work with what I'm doing at the moment.
Well, speaking about what you are doing at the moment, you became managing director of the Final Whistle towards the end of 2015. For our listeners who may not have heard of this incredible organization, please inform us what you do when it comes to assisting athletes.
Yeah, so what we do is we work both with the individual athlete and also with the sporting organisation to help them create options around careers or study that suit them outside of sport. And then we actually help them transition through into that next career stage by helping them articulate the unique skills they've got through their sporting career and how they apply to the settings that they want to go and actually pursue their next challenge in. And we do that through a range of online career tools, but we also then assist both the individuals and sporting organisations in creating programs around mentoring, work experience, boutique networking events where, you know, there's only people there that are interested in a certain career, to try to make sure that athlete's thought of it, they have a plan B in place, but not only that, they've actually gone and created networks, experienced the working environment, understand how to articulate why their skills in rugby transfer to the options that they're interested in, and then manage them as well as we can anyway, through that transition into the next stage of their life.
That's absolutely brilliant. Well, Greg, would you say that this business path you have taken in career coaching and personal development coaching would have been at all possible had you not experienced your career-ending injury as a player? And what do you find most rewarding about this side of business?
Yeah, I don't think it would have been. You know, we do quite a lot of work around helping people identify their values in relation to what they want to do. And, you know, I think in sport we're really good at coming up with the values of the team. And we've all sat in kind of team building sessions and we work out what the 5 key values are of the team. But I think sometimes we lack the ability to help the individual actually understand what their own personal values are. And for me, you know, I'm a big believer that our voids create our values. And, you know, the void for me was feeling that I was supported through that transition in a way that helped me feel good about myself. So that's definitely my own experience has helped me to help shape the business I'm in. And in that sense, I think hopefully I can share my experiences. And it's around sharing those experiences so that the current generation of athletes and rugby players, it's still going to be tough. It's tough anytime you have a major transition in your life, but it's understanding that there's people who've been through it before that can help you in terms of transitioning, and that it's all right, and there's a plan, and there's ways to manage it.
Well, speaking about transitioning, Greg, you personally know how important it is for professional rugby players and even sportsmen and women alike to put those plans in place during their sporting careers that will assist them in making that transition as seamless as possible after retirement. Although, do you feel that all athletes in this day and age are taking this seriously enough? And is it the preparation that may be lacking, or not enough assistance being given by the unions associated with each sport?
Yeah, I think it varies. Some organisations have a lot of assistance. Some organisations have very little. What I think is missing, and the athletes are telling us is missing, is that it's not a mandatory part of the program. And having been a coach, when we dealt with academy players who are 18 or 19 years old, we basically helped them understand what was important. And if it meant that they needed to understand the importance of lifting weights, then weights were in the program. And if they needed to understand the importance of recovery was in the program, or nutrition was in the program, etc. But yet what we do with our career development or our transition support is we say, it's there if you want it, but it's off on the side, and, go and get it if you need it, kind of thing. But from an athlete's point of view, my eyes are on the senior players, they're on my idols, they're on the coaches and what the coach wants. And unless the senior players and unless the coaches are telling me that this is important, then it's going to take a really courageous and forward-thinking young man or woman to go and access that. So I think sport in general needs to, if they accept that there is a duty of care, which I think there does exist these days because of the fact that we tend to be getting athletes younger and younger, and we're demanding more and more of their time, then if there is a duty of care, then this has to be put into the program, and everyone involved in the sport, from administrators to coaches to senior players, has to communicate to younger players that this is important. And whilst you may not see the benefit in it as a 19-year-old, you definitely will when you're 25, 28, 32, and you started to witness some of the challenges and also some of the ups and downs that come with a sporting career that an old broken down athlete knows a bit better than a young buck.
Well, you hit the nail right on the head there, Greg. But with that said, do you find that professional athletes may at times be too proud or even ashamed to ask for help when it comes to preparing for that next chapter of their lives?
Yeah, I think they are. It's getting better, but, sport, we're kind of taught as we come through that any challenge that's thrown at us, all you need to do is you put your head down, you don't complain, you work harder, and you'll achieve your goals. And it's kind of a sporting ethos that's bred into athletes that anything's possible if you train hard, set goals and work towards them. And I think what happens is whenever an athlete goes through transition, that training kicks into place, and we say, okay, well, it's all right, I'll just put my head down, I'll train harder, I'll set goals, I'll work towards it. But then perhaps after 6 months or 12 months or 2 years' time, things haven't maybe gone as well as you'd hoped, and by then you've lost that support network. You don't have as strong a connections as you used to when you're in sport. It's not as easy to reach out as it used to be. Maybe some of the people that you'd like to reach out to are still actually in the sporting environment and maybe don't understand what you're going through. And I think unless we create those opportunities that are safe places, it is hard, and it is hard for athletes to admit. But we interviewed Shane Webke, a famous Australian rugby league player, a while ago, and he said, if someone had just told me it was going to be hard, I could have dealt with it and knew that I was going to get through it and be fine on the other side. But what happened was, without that knowledge, when things started to go a little bit south for him, he started to think, well, no one else has spoken to me about this, so it must be something wrong with me. And so that's what he started to tell himself. There must be something wrong with me. No one else has mentioned this. They would have told me. And so I think, that's the opportunity for sport and for organisations like the RBN, and very much a part of what we're trying to do in the event next week is just to get people talking about the realities of life, whether it's sport or in the office or in the work environment, and saying there are going to be tough patches. Everyone goes through them. There are certain moments that, around whether it's transition in sport or grief in the family or whatever else that are easy markers, and then there's some other ones that aren't as easy markers. But if we can share those experiences, create awareness, and let other people know that it's okay to go through those periods and that there's help there, then I think it's a big part of starting the conversation to really embrace everyone and make sure everyone's okay.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, what you have mentioned thus far has elements that could play their part in the Rugby Business Network event in Sydney on the evening of August 7th. As I mentioned earlier, raising the awareness of mental health is on the agenda, which is a topic that has become a major consideration for many within sport. When we speak about mental health in rugby, though, what is it we are exactly referring to?
I think a lot of the stuff, a number of the players' associations around the world have done surveys recently around this in rugby specifically. It comes down to basically any prolonged thought process that starts to inhibit your ability to normally have your, daily routines or normal level of performance. And that's kind of the way we keep it a fairly, not being a trained psychologist, that's kind of like my backyard psychologist way of explaining it. But a down day or moments of feeling off are just part of, the ups and downs of life. But if it becomes something that is prolonged to the point that it inhibits you from having your normal interactions with people around you or your normal ability to perform at your level, then that's kind of how we use it as a general marker. And, I think in rugby it comes to athletes talk around fear of injury, they talk around anxiety around transition, performance pressure, selection. Obviously, depending where you are in the world, a lot of people, and some of my experiences with Fijian athletes quite often come around to pressure in terms of supporting family, being away from family, and then obviously the whole plethora of social media kind of exposure that modern athletes are exposed to.
Well, definitely these discussions and communication around mental health in the rugby community needs more focus. Why do you think, though, it's a subject that perhaps has this stigma attached to it and is something that should not be brought out in the open?
I think it's twofold. One would probably just be, sports tended to have a masculine culture, and it was seen as a sign of weakness to talk around feelings, regardless of any feelings, let alone mental health. And it was always, the mentally tough were those that could handle the tough moments without looking to talk about them or seek support. And that's probably got a grounding in it. And from my own experience, I think it's also a case of quite often when the people who are around those conversations don't know how to handle them or are uncomfortable or awkward in terms of actually dealing with them, it can sometimes be easier for them to make light of those conversations or humour or ignore them, more out of just, caution or nervousness about saying the wrong thing. But I think that can combined with the masculine culture kind of let people say, well, I'm nervous about bringing it up, and if I do bring it up, then the response I get makes me feel that perhaps I shouldn't have brought it up. And I think the masculine culture part is probably changing a little bit as senior athletes and some of the strongest men in sport have come out and said that they've had issues, and I think that's breaking down barriers. I think the next thing for us to do is really work on arming everyone in those environments with enough awareness so that if someone does raise an issue, they're comfortable. They don't have to solve the issue, but they're comfortable talking about it and have enough knowledge to perhaps refer them on to the best people to support them.
Some interesting points raised there. Well, Greg, these Rugby Business Network events in Australia always offer up some fantastic guest panel speakers for the businesses and charities that attend. Could you mention who will be present for the hour-long discussion on Monday?
The first one's a young woman called Tani Schultz, who has set up a company called MateCheck. And MateCheck is an online mental health and wellbeing app which basically allows organisations to track the general mental health and well-being of their organisation, but also for the individuals to be able to monitor their own well-being and to reach out and get anonymous assistance 24/7 in real time without necessarily having to go through multiple levels of applications or request or notifying the organisation in a way that they feel might be a little bit prohibitive. Then we've got Dan Hunt, who's an ex-St George Illawarra player. He has his own transition story through injury and some mental health challenges. And he's now a big part of the mental health movement, which goes around and educates organisations around the awareness and signs of mental health and how to, practically, like we mentioned, potentially arm people with enough knowledge to be of support in those situations. And finally, we've got Brendan Cannon, who obviously ex-Wallaby player, general stalwart of the Australian rugby scene, both around different coaching, commentating positions, and has had some of his own challenges in terms of accidents and certain other things along the way. So Brendan's bringing, his own experience with it and a very close experience in the last 12 months, being a very good friend of Dan Vickerman's as well. So between the panel, I think we get a really good mixture of expertise, both in the sports space and the work space, both in terms of academic expertise and also practical expertise.
Definitely some amazing guest panel speakers lined up there. Lastly, Greg, for those that may have never been to an RBN event in Australia and are considering attending either this one in Sydney or others in the future, in what way can they benefit from making an appearance?
The great thing about the RBN events you've got the language of rugby there that introduces everyone, and it's a common way of meeting and mingling, but it really is just an opportunity to explore concepts, whether they be in sport, in business, in the military, in well-being and health, that can improve both you as an individual and also the organisation that you're involved with. And I think very much in that sense fits the values of rugby, and it's all shapes, it's all sizes, people coming together and sharing some common values with the effort of trying to be better as a group and as individuals. And I think the RBN really encompasses that in a safe place, but somewhere that supports camaraderie, but camaraderie in a way that really tries to get the best out of the individuals and organisations involved. And if we can achieve that for people that attend and give them both a friendly but also valuable experience, then hopefully that's what they can take away, and definitely what I've taken away in my experience.
Brilliant. Absolutely worth taking the time to attend some of those events. Well, Greg, thank you for providing us with the opportunity to discuss a bit about the importance of transitioning, career preparation and mental health issues in rugby. Enjoy the event in Sydney on Monday, the 7th of August.
Thanks very much. Pleasure.